Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wandering Scribe Book of the Month. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And for July's Book of the Month, we are journeying into the world of When Shadows Grow Tall by Maressa Voss. Now, Maressa Voss was on the show last year, and her book, well, it is a very, very high epic fantasy tale of action, adventure, a little bit of espionage, a little bit of intrigue. So, let me give you a brief overview of the story. In the grasp, a realm on the threshold of enlightenment, the dactyli guard the fading embers of their ancient brotherhood, dedicated to the pursuit of absolute truth. Lovelace and Gunnar, two of the Order's last rangers, find themselves on the precipice of a changing world. When the Order faces a fatal threat from within, Lovelace and Gunnar embark on a dangerous ranging where they discover more than the welfare of the Order is at stake. A rogue dactyl named Alev amasses an army of those he calls the Burned Ones, mercenaries wielding elemental forces. Lovelace and Gunnar are forced to grapple with the unimaginable implications. Meanwhile, the grasp languishes under the oppressive rule of Osbert, who exploits the recent advent of the printing press to smother the fires of budding enlightenment. A young woman named Kylene undertakes a journey to find her missing father, a prominent printer wanted for sedition, and on her journey, she meets a mysterious group of outcasts with whom Kylene takes up refuge and assumes the mantle of her father's fight for freedom. And in the mountains of Fortan, Lovelace and Gunnar encounter a feral young woman named Cora. Her mere existence uproots an age-old belief and puts to ground a new myth. Magic can be awakened, and it can be taught. As their paths intertwine, a shared purpose emerges to expose Osbert's tyranny, thwart Alev's dangerous plot, and rekindle the flames of enlightenment. So begins the battle for the minds of the Graspius people and a quest for the heart of magic itself. So without further ado, let's dive right into the world of When Shadows Grow Tall by Maressa Voss. It was the dahlias he was after. Their orange blooms reminded him of fireworks, all bright and blazing. Only the lilies were quiet and lasted much longer than those bursts of flames that lit the night sky on Mother's Day. Also, he could hold the flowers in his hands and see them up close, which he definitely could. Not do with fireworks, seeing as they would blow him all to bits. Not the canna lilies, mine, rang the memory of his mom's voice, clear as a morning bell. Those are no more edible than the shoes on your feet. And don't even so much as think about touching the wolf's mane. Do you hear me, Everard? Everard? Everard blinked. A grin bloomed across his face as his fingers brushed the purplish hooded flowers of the wolf's bane growing along the stream's edge. It was the same purple as when the sun sets behind a storm. Wolfsbane would only kill him if he ate it. Anyone with half a wit knew that. But that was his mam, always worried he would cartwheel off a cliff or maybe trip on nothing and fall headfirst down a well. Everin crouched low at the stream, a little thing flowing just enough that the edges hadn't gone all soupy green, but not so much that there wasn't an appreciable number of pollywogs awaiting their froggy fate. As it was, these ones had only the stubbiest bits of tail left and were using their tiny new arms and legs to glide along the muddy bottom. 5 days more, Everett would wager, and they would spring forth from the pool. Then they could go wherever they pleased. Everett swirled the water with a cupped hand, sending the pollywogs scattering. It was nearing midday, the balancing point between yesterday and tomorrow. And tomorrow bore promise. Tomorrow was his name day, his 10th, but he could only rightly remember back to his 5th. His mom had made cream fritters with currants that year, and his mouth still watered. to think of the steaming hot cakes, the burst of tartness on his tongue with each crimson bay. Everett rose and stretched his arms toward the sky beyond the canopy, feeling excited and a little proud. He was just like the pollywogs, he thought, confined to live in a place that was altogether too small. Each name day brought him 1 year closer to freedom, 1 year nearer to adventure. When he was grown, he could go wherever he liked. He had heard of mountains so tall they disappeared into the clouds, and the sea. The sea was a stream with no edge and with no end. Horizons, colorful and vast, stretched forth in Everett's mind, and he shivered. There would come a day. He spotted them growing there in a patch of sunlight broken through the trees. He took up his satchel, leapt over the stream, and bounded towards the bright spot. When he reached it, he knelt in the loom and saw that this patch of lilies was one of many. He smiled a little, knowing how pleased his mam would be when he came home with a satchel full. One by one, he dug up the plants, taking care not to snap off any parts of their spindly roots that his mam would boil with port and use to treat an ague or bruise the orange petals that would thicken his name-day stew. He snapped off one unopened bud from its stalk and popped it into his mouth. It gave a satisfying crunch and tasted like nothing so much as a radish with honey drizzled over it. No feast, but it was food, and not too bad tasting for all that it was just a flower. As he worked, he sang beneath his breath, "That old pauper Pete had not to eat, and so he bought a saddle, bereft of a seat. He used two of his feet, and marched right up to some cattle." The sharp crack of a snapping branch rang out from behind. Everett paused and wheeled around. There was no one there. So he resumed, imagining that he was Raoul the Bard, who traveled to every inn and tavern of the grass, gathering stories and songs as he went, eating the finest pies for supper each night. From patch to patch he moved, his voice rising over the subtle din of the forest. With each verse his voice grew bolder and louder until he sang with such might that he thought he had found the tippy top of his lungs, that place that everyone was always going on about. And so he boiled his saddle. A voice came from behind, cutting through the air, sudden and sharp. Startled, Everett dropped his satchel, his heart beating fierce. He whirled around. A man stood there, mere paces away, his grin revealing a pair of missing teeth. There was a gleam in his eye that made Everett tremble. He dressed like a peacekeeper, only his cloak and shield and sword were not the usual gleaming white, but red, like a blood-soaked penny. Everett's eyes darted this way and that. More men were materializing from behind the trees. He gulped. "Hello, sirs. What brings you this corner of the woods?" The man who finished the verse leered. "Why, we came to find you." "I should think that much was obvious, Boyle," he said, gesturing to his men behind him. He was the only face twisted into a terrible grin. "Can't think what you want me for," Everett managed, fear seizing him, making him tremble. He knew exactly why they'd come for him. But how had they known? He had been so careful. "It's a wretched fate, I know," the man said. He snapped his fingers, and a small flame appeared between his forefingers and thumb. "He's like me," Everett thought, wild hope flickering through him that sputtered and died. Like dogs, the men crept closer, hemming at him. Everett whirled, but there were two more behind him. He did the only thing he could do. He jumped. He shot through the canopy without looking up, showering twigs and leaves upon the men below. He felt himself begin to fall back down again and scrambled desperately to find a branch to grab hold of, missing several before his hand closed around one sturdy limb jutting out from the tree's middle. "Nice trick, that," the man drawled from below. "Wager the master would appreciate your spirit, but orders are orders, Boyle, and you gotta go." Everett's hands were slipping, slick as they were with sweat. His right fingers lost his grip, and his arm fell limp to his side. His legs dangled, failing like mad. He tried to jump again, but nothing happened. A foothold. He needed a foothold. "Don't make me smoke you out. It's gotta be by blood. I don't make the rules. Come on down, I'll make it quick. Everett kicked out, aiming for a branch just beneath him. He landed, wobbled, and jumped again, shooting for an oak behind the man. And this one huge with massive twisting branches. He flew through the air, reached, missed, and fell to the ground, his legs folding beneath him with a terrible snap. Pain blazed through him from the bottom up. Everett rolled onto his belly and desperately dragged himself away. A pair of red boots blocked his path, and he looked up. The man with the fire fingers reached down and yanked Everett upright. "Brave little boy," he said. Then there was movement, cruel and swift. The gleam of a sword blade singing through the air. Everett grew very hot and then very cold. And then there was nothing much at all. His eyes fell on his satchel, brimming with daylilies, orange draining from the petals, green leaching from the stems, until it was all white. Color poured back into the world, and the height of day fell to dusk. The gentle humming that marked the transition from memory to present moment faded, and Lovelace came back into the heaviness of his body. He withdrew the shaking fingers from the boy's forehead, willing his gaze to linger over long on his face. It was smooth and clean as new-made cloth, and his eyes, nut brown and round as coins, were open to the sky. Lovelace smoothed the tangle of his black hair and gently pressed the lids to close. He was dressed in a thin muslin shirt and pants, undyed and threadbare. Poor then, but not so poverty-stricken that he had been starving. Thin, but only in the way that young boys are even when they're exuberant, outmatch even their own appetites. Lovelace rose and leaned his head against the oak's rough trunk and closed his eyes to stem the revulsion rising sharply in his gut. "Well," came the voice of Gunnar from behind. Lovelace began, his voice breaking. "He was brave to the last." "The men in red again?" Lovelace nodded, cleared his throat, and spat, taking care to do so far from their quarry and the massive oak beneath which lay his remains. The boy sat propped between the thick tangle of roots, his thin arms and legs sprawled grotesquely as if he were made to play jester in the woods. A great wound had gutted him from navel to neck, spilling his innards on the ground between the crooked runes of his legs. By the look of him, he had not been long dead. Flesh flies hovered over the bloody cavity, but had not yet dwindled their descendants, those maggots that would feast upon the raw life offered there. "We missed him by a few bells," he said. The thought made Lovelace sick. Had he and Gunnar left earlier, the boy might be with them, alive and gibbering about pollywogs and the flowers he would need to deliver to his man before he left home for good. How he always knew he was special, always knew he was destined for more than a life selling forged goods to the apocrisies of Ardulur. "It was the same as the last," Lovelace said gruffly, taking several paces behind the boy and the tree to gather his thoughts. He bent low to squat beside Gunnar, his fingers moving idly over the serrated edges of oak leaves and fallen acorns. "More taunt than talk, the bastards," Lovelace said, his face upturned toward the sky. It swelled with dust like a bruise. Still no word as to why, though a master was mentioned, and the gaffer had fire on his fingertips, though he's no dactyl, I know. Gunnar grunted, and Lovelace cast a side glance at his companion. What was he thinking? Was his stomach also twisted with sadness and with shame? The question, much like its subject, was destined to dwell in the realm of the unknown. Gunnar never told. "We need to make haste for the Merodach," Gunnar said, lissom form rising from his crouch. His eyes were mercurial, the color of quicksilver. They were locked on the boy's face with an unplaceable intensity. This boy was nauseant, dactyl born. Alev did this. Manik must know. Lovelace knew that he was right. There was not enough time to bury him, not when there might be others in danger of the same fate. Gunnar broke his gaze and turned abruptly, his stride brisk as he moved back in the direction of the horses. Lovelace sighed, taking one last look at the oak. It was a giant, its broad trunk suggesting an age far greater than he and Gunnar could ever hope to live. It held the boy in the tangled embrace of its roots, grown, humped, and massive in the search for fodder beyond their foundation. Kneeling, he crossed both his forearms and pressed them slowly against his chest in a dactyli formal salute. He bowed his head and inclined his body toward the blood-soaked earth, pressing his forehead there. "Take him back, make him anew," he said quietly. His rise to stand was slow, as if he had lived 100 years, though he could only claim a quarter of that number. He wound his way around the tree's great trunk. Gunnar was standing there, inscrutable, and staring at a knot of wolfsbane growing out and up of the trunk. Their purple blooms were dark with dusk. Lovelace took up the blade at his waist and carefully unearthed 3 plants from root to stem. With a scrap of woven flax from the pouch at his hip, he wrapped them tightly, wiping the knife clean against his leg of his pants. He returned both blade and parcel to his pouch and took one leaping step across the stream, away from the oak and the boy's new-made remains. "I could kill 4 dozen men with this much wolfsbane," Lovelace said absently as Gunnar fell into step beside him. "I don't know why you bother with such trifles," Gunnar said. "Poison is a weapon for cowards." "Poison is a weapon, gun," Lovelace said. Besides, it's better for the balance of things to match the essence of killing to the man, or woman for that matter," he grumbled, brushing aside the budding whorl of a bracken fern. Gunnar's silence was telling enough. He disproved nothing new about that. Lovelace didn't know why he bothered either, but he wasn't going to tell Gunnar that. Finding the boy had left him with a tumult of feelings. Vengeful was one of them, but there was no direction for emotion, no recipient at hand upon which to bestow it. So he picked up some flowers instead. They walked the remainder of the distance with the horses, no words passing between them. Gunnar was already atop his gelding before Lovelace had untied the knot of his lead. His thick fingers fumbled with the reins, deep in thought as he was. Once undone, he placed one foot in the stirrup and paused, looking up at Gunnar beseechingly. In his heart, anger and despair battled for precedence, 2 beasts with talons and teeth that threatened to tear them apart. Could Gunnar speak to not share feeling? No, inner anguish on account of the utter incredibility of their shared circumstance. His horse whinnicked softly and turned to nudge Lovelace with the velvet of her nose. Onward, he thought. It was the only way. "Back home, then," he said with a nod. Gunnar inclined his head, his eyes bright and cold as a distant star, locked with Lovelace for only a moment before he turned his horse south, back the way they had come. And with that, viewers and listeners, we are going to stop here. Now, I really like the word choice in Maressa Voss's story in the prologue. It definitely does set a precedent and definitely sets the world for its magic. And I like how you have these characters, Gunnar and Lovelace, already they seem so different. One has a high stake of honor, but one pretty much will do whatever it means to achieve their goals for the right reasons, in this case being poison. Now, this so far seems to be a very promising story. The language and word choice I definitely like and appreciate, but I can definitely feel that it may confuse some readers for some sentences. So I can definitely see that maybe a turnoff for some people. But other than that, the story is very promising. The prologue definitely lets you know what the world is like. The names I could definitely see could be an issue of pronunciation, but that could be all by preference. Other than that, great pacing, great build up, Great lead. It already lets you know that this is already happening before, so there's no lead up to Alev. You already know what he's doing, or at least there's a hint of what he's done and what the men are doing under his command. So, with that said, great story all around. I give this a 4 out of 5 for initial impressions. And if you want to see Maressa Voss's interview, I will link it for you to watch, as well as link where to buy it in the description below. Until next time, viewers and listeners, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. We'll see you all in the next episode.